Okay, so I'm sure you guys have noticed that I haven't been uploading a lot of videos lately. There is a reason for that, which I will touch on briefly in a minute. But I figured that because of that, the next video that I dropped for you guys should be a big one. And what is bigger right now in the minds of myself and the people who tend to watch my videos than Steven Universe the movie? Yes, I still have Steven Universe the movie on the brain. Which may seem goofy talking about it this much, but who amongst you doesn't feel the exact same way at this point? It's so close at this point that it might as well already be here, which is just the most excruciating part of waiting for something that you know you're gonna love. But at the same time, the fact that it is almost here is why I'm making this video in the first place. In case you missed the title, this is going to be my top 5-ish, so I am kind of half ad-libbing this as I do a lot of my videos. Things that I would like to see happen in Steven Universe, the movie. And we're just going to jump right into it, starting with one which I already know 100%, you already know 100%, is going to happen. We already heard one of them, it was fantastic. And that's great music. I want great music from Steven Universe, the movie. We know it's going to be a musical. It's not going to be like entirely a musical. There is going to be dialogue in this that is not in song, but it is going to be a musical with many songs, some of which I imagine will be shorter than others, and then others which I imagine will be full musical numbers. And it's not as if I expect the songs in this show to be bad or even mediocre, but if the one song we've gotten so far, what is it called, The True Kind of Love, which is an Estelle and Zach song, if it's any indication, the caliber of music in this movie is going to be even a cut above the majority of the show itself. I'm going to link to the video that Cartoon Network dropped of The True Kind of Love so you guys can go listen to it for yourself. It doesn't really spoil anything about the movie. It just gives you a taste of what's to come, so if you haven't listened to it, you really should. It's fantastic. And while I am kind of assuming, say what you want about assuming anything, but I am kind of assuming that that's going to be the big musical number of the movie, that everything else is going to be smaller and in one way or another less impressive, it still sets a high bar, and I expect the other music in the movie to live up to it fairly easily. Moving on from that, though, to something that I guarantee we're probably not going to see in this movie, something that I put on every single one of these things I'd like to see from Steven Universe lists, something major that's not from Steven's perspective. I know that this is a tune that I sing a lot, but I really want the show to break away from the Steven-only perspective. I want us to be able to see things happening in the show that aren't from Steven's perspective. Now that the whole diamond threat is effectively over, like the diamonds are still there and it's still possible they could be in one way or another threatening in the future, but the diamond saga, let's call it, is over. Wouldn't this be the perfect time to switch to slightly different storytelling conventions for the show? There's going to be a time skip. Steven will have shot up in age a couple of years, and we're going to have so many new characters to work with going forward. All of the uncorrupted gems, there's the possibility that every single one of them remained on Earth. Every single one of them is a new potential character that we could follow, and there's just going to be so much potential cool stuff that we could potentially miss if the show does not live up to the potential offered it by breaking away from Steven's perspective. If we have to wait for Steven to become involved in the events with those various other gems, there's going to be aspects of their development that we miss, just like there were large swaths of the development of Peridot and Lapis that we missed because Steven wasn't always there with them at the barn. This is in many ways a new start for the show. I want to see some sign that they're going to break away from that old storytelling convention and that we're going to see stories from outside of Steven's perspective at least every once in a while going forward. I'd love that a lot. It's not going to happen though. The Crewniverse has said straight up that this is Steven's story. They don't really have an intention of breaking away from his perspective ever during the duration of this show. But a guy can dream, can't he? going from there, and in a similar vein, I want to see those uncorrupted gems. I want to get an idea of who they are, if not as individuals, because I doubt we'd have time for that in this movie, then as a gem society living on Earth. I want to get a feel for where they are as a group at the point in time in which this movie is set, what their society looks like, how they interact with each other, what they do on a day-to-day basis. And if I'm right, and Peridot and Lapis are chilling out in what I'm calling Gemtown, we've seen it in that movie poster that we got before the trailer, we saw it in the trailer. If I'm right, and that's where Peridot and Lapis are, then there's a very good chance that we're going to get at least a cursory look at it, because we do know that Peridot is in this movie. But just as the trailer made it clear that this movie is going to spend at least a short amount of time establishing the new status quo with Homeworld and how Earth and Homeworld are related to one another, now the kind of relationship that those two places have with one another socioeconomically or politically or whatever, I want the movie to take a short amount of time to show us the state of gem society on Earth, because for the first time ever, that's a thing. There is actual legitimate gem society on Earth. I even hope that we get to see some sign that gems from the zoo, implying that the humans from the zoo were also removed from the zoo, have come to Earth and integrated into that Gemtown society in some way or another. Maybe a shot of members of the Famethist in the background or something. That would be enough for me in that particular regard. Or just in general, some indication that some Homeworld gems are choosing to come to Earth and live freely in that fashion rather than living in this new, freer Homeworld society. Again, we know for a fact that we're going to get some indication for some amount of time of how the state of Homeworld has changed. I just hope that we also get a parallel to that for what has changed on Earth. And as sort of a 3B, I'd like to see some indication of how things in Beach City itself have changed, with Lars, the pink magic person, living there now, at least presumably. I don't think he would have just run off into space again. And with greater knowledge of and greater interaction with gems being a thing now, I want to see how that's affected stuff. And maybe there's even like a relationship between Beach City and Gemtown. If that's the case, I'd like to see some indication or implication of that too. That would be super cool to see. Setting up the new status quo, not just of Steven and Homeworld and the core crystal gems, but of the town and its parallel, Gemtown, would help make the stakes of the movie feel real, as the trailer does show Beach City effectively being destroyed. Maybe the people of Beach City after this movie are going to have to be refugees and the gems are going to have to help take care of them or something. It'd be super interesting, but we'd have to get some sort of groundwork, some sort of foundation of how gem society on Earth works for that to work. And so I think we need it in one way or another. Number 2 is satisfying motivations for the villain, and this is another one that I definitely think we're going to get, but it's one that I still want to mention. As much as I don't mind the, let's call it the in-process redemption of the diamonds, because we haven't really seen for sure they are 100% redeemed yet. As much as I don't mind that, at the end of the day, the motivations of the diamonds boiled down to, they thought Pink was dead, obviously, but also they were just doing what they thought they were supposed to do. It makes sense, and it allows them to be redeemable in the first place, thematically speaking, but it kind of sucks as interesting motivation beyond causing us to wonder and theorize about how gem society as it existed for so long came to exist. I want this villain, whoever she ends up being. Yes, I know about the leak. I still don't care. Don't talk about it in my comments, please. Whoever she ends up being, I want her to have a really dynamic and interesting, compelling reason for doing the things that she's doing. And again, I think she's going to. I think I've even worked out what it might be. I've talked about it in other videos, but I still want to mention it just because the show's track record for this kind of thing is kind of hit or miss. Which brings us to number 1, and that is I want the crystal gems to be involved in this movie. Let me explain. Of course, we know that the core crystal gem characters, Steven, Amethyst, Pearl, and Garnet, are going to be involved in the events of this movie. But I want all of them to be involved in the events of this movie. Like, we don't know, for example, whether or not the uncorrupted gems still consider themselves crystal gems or not at this point. Like, we don't know how much they know about who Rose actually was. But I have to imagine that that information got out because this is Steven we're talking about, and he's one of the purest, most honest people to ever be conceived by human imagination. So I have to imagine that some of them renounced the crystal gem name once they learned the truth, right? So I'm not really talking about all of them, but I am talking about the crystal gems as we've known them for a decent length of time in the show at this point. I'm talking Connie. I want her to be directly involved in events. I'm talking arguably even Lars and his off-colors as they sort of joined the crystal gems when they met Garnet. I'm talking Peridot and Lapis, and of course Bismuth, and even Greg. I do consider him a crystal gem too at this point. I want everyone, every main character, and even primary recurring character, I guess is how you describe them, involved in the plot of this movie somehow. Especially if I'm right and the villain is either someone who is mad that they have changed Homeworld society for what I would consider to be the better, but for what this character would consider to be the worst, or if she has some background with the crystal gems in the first place. Either way, I feel that all of the crystal gems, all of the main crystal gems as we know them, should be involved in dealing with that. Like, yes, Steven should take center stage here, and it definitely looks from the trailer like he's going to, because, again, I really get the sense that this villain is going to have some personal history with his mom, one way or another, and that even if she doesn't, she is going to, at the very least, have some personal beef with him. So he definitely needs to deal with the climax of this thing himself, primarily, but leading up to that point, everyone should be involved in this. This is a major threat to their entire planet and their crystal gems. Protecting the Earth is what they do. I just want this to feel like it is happening on the scale that that trailer implied that it is. I don't want this to feel like a contained conflict that just happens to have global consequences, you know? You know what I mean? It's the kind of thing that the show has done before, and it was okay because it was just an episode of the show. This is a movie. It should feel like a movie. Oh, and I almost forgot because I somehow forgot to put it in my notes and also somehow wrote something else out in its place. God, this video is so disorganized. And I guess that's what you would call the real number one or number 0 or whatever on this. Now, I guess top 6 list. What a great number. And that's stuff to theorize about. Like, nothing super explicit, obviously, just the kind of thing that this show does really, really well. Stuff in the background, stuff in the dialogue, which implies mysteries, implies lore. Stuff for us to think about once the movie's over. Maybe even hints as to where the story is going to go going forward. I miss when this show was chock full of mysteries. And it's not anymore. Not really, anyway. I think the last real big mystery in the show left is the mystery of where gems came from, which, incidentally, if we get some hint that we're going to learn where gems came from later on in the show, that'd be great. Too, of course. But I think that's the last big mystery left in the show, and I miss when the show was at least in part a mystery. I want to go back to that a little bit, so I'd like them to introduce some more mysterious lore elements that somewhere in this movie somehow. Like, there's a reason why the show felt like it could have been over at the end of season 5. It's because there wasn't really much left for us to discover in the show at that point. So if the show's going to go on, I feel like we have to feel like there's more for us to discover down the line. And that's really all I had to say about that one, because I'm sure you guys know exactly what I'm talking about and want the exact same frickin' thing. And maybe, theoretically, the movie wouldn't really be the best place to start introducing this stuff. But I would argue that it actually is, because you don't really have to include that much of it. You just have to include enough of it in there, like just enough of a hint of it in there, to reassure us that it is going to happen overall as the series goes forward. And at the end of the day, that's really it. Those are the things that I mainly want to see from this thing. I mean, I want to see the characters being the characters too, obviously, but that, I would imagine, goes without saying. And seeing as how I am 100% sure that every Steven Universe fan watching this video right now has similar things that they want from the movie. What do you want to see in this movie? Let me know in the comment section down below. Even list it out if you want, kind of like I did, even though this is a really bad list structure, all things considered. While you head down there, though, and get started doing that, I do want to let you guys know I have a video coming out either today or tomorrow. I'm not really sure yet. This can be very rambly. It's not going to be fun to watch at all. And yet I'm going to ask that every single one of the people watching this video right now keeps an eye out for it. You will definitely recognize it when you see it. It's going to seem very, very personal. I'd like to ask you to keep an eye out for it and watch it when it drops. It's going to explain why I haven't been uploading as much lately, why I feel like I'm kind of in a slump right now, and just get kind of raw and emotional a little bit in there too. I'm really going to open up to you guys. I feel like I need to at this point. It's nothing like world-shakingly bad or anything. It's not like the channel's going away or anything like that. It's just some stuff I'd like to get off my chest. And I kind of just feel like you guys knowing about it would be enough to help me through it a little bit, if that makes sense. So keep an eye out for that, and give it a watch for me, please. I'd really appreciate it. Either way, though, this has been AJ22, and I will talk to you guys later.